Didn't have any special Thanksgiving theme music?
I didn't. Thanksgiving
No
needs
Turkey Day jams?
Thanksgiving.
Are there any Thanksgiving songs out there? There's a lot of
Just-
Christmas songs, obviously.
I was just about to say that. That's why all the people that are complaining, like, why is like you guys are playing Christmas music so early? It's like, well, Thanksgiving needs to make some bangers, and then we'll play those. But it's just like there's not a lot of them. So what do you expect?
A nice, I was thinking of a nice ballad kind of set to the tune of "Make It, Let It Snow." But you know, my uncle's talking conspiracies at the table.
You know what? We probably
Starting a
need
fight
to.
in the back room of.
We should probably write that song. It's the onus is probably on us.
We got a day. I guess we could just hammer it out after this. See if we can get on Spotify's top 100 by tomorrow.
Yeah, or maybe we just give it some time and roll back next year. Be ready for it. Be ready for a calendar year from tomorrow.
No, if this podcast is any indication of our aptitude for working with one another, then we're not going to start this right now for next year. We're going to start a day before. Like we do
That's
everything else.
fair. Maybe we should.
It's actually the perfect timing.
Okay, maybe we should just do it tonight, because otherwise, you're right. It never will get done.
All right, guys. So it's Against the Mob podcast time. This is Logan Carpenter, my good, faithful co-host Matthew Billingsley, here to give our libertarian spins on the world and tell you what's wrong, what's good, what to look forward to, what to watch out for, and take you into this beautiful holiday season, the Thanksgiving. It's a time for thankfulness, for family, for tranquility, right, Matthew?
Mm-hmm.
Right, Matthew?
Yeah.
Is it truly? Or is part of this same reason we don't have Thanksgiving songs rolled out and ready? Because there is not the same kind of cultural backing and grassroots movement behind Thanksgiving that one might think.
Okay, that's a really interesting question. I mean, Thanksgiving wasn't actually, I think it was Roosevelt that made it a national holiday. Before then, it had kind of bounced around.
You're already spouting incorrect disinformation propaganda from the government, Matthew.
Okay, fair enough. I mean,
Let's think about it. I've got a whole theory laid out here for
hit
you.
me with it.
I'll run it through. So let's think about what happens right before Thanksgiving.
Okay.
What could this be the smokescreen for? We just got done with an election, Matthew. Is it any coincidence to you that we celebrate this holiday about peace, about being thankful for what you have, about not worrying about an overabundance or living without the burden of taxes, but to sit down and be thankful, to have a meal, and to look in the faces of our family immediately after we had I assume, have all been shady elections back to this nation's beginning. There's more to it than this, in fact. This is a good moment to offshoot it in the same way that once we had Occupy Wall Street and the Boston Tea Party is when we started this gigantic woke movement that we've all obviously speculated might be governmental interference to take our eyes off the ball of the prize. Immediately in this time when we should be upset about the shady two-party duopoly system that runs this country and the people they've put in charge to perpetuate the war machine, instead you are invented this holiday where you get to sit down and have some talks with your crazy uncle about conspiracy theories at the table, as I mentioned. So you're talking about Michelle Obama's dick and not the military-industrial complex. You're talking about Jewish lasers and dictatorial designs by our new president, rather than banking cabals that run the entire world. When? Obviously, you don't know when, since you were misquoting earlier, but it was actually established in 1863. Do you know
by Abraham Lincoln after Gettysburg?
Lincoln. And who would know better about misgivings of elections leading to riots and upheaval within the nation than Abraham Lincoln himself? A governmental conspiracy of PSYOP to keep us from our corporate overlords, to keep us distracted so that we're not focused on the exact prize that is in front of us. And don't even get me started on George W. Bush's senior annual Turkey Day pardoning program. Who knows what the military-industrial complex is doing with those birds?
That's okay. Totally fair. I think that your theory is not outrageous. I think that it is a classic case of when you look for the boogeyman, you will find him. Whether he actually be in your closet or that's just the way that your shirts are arranged. so be it. If you see the boogeyman, he's there. I don't think you're necessarily wrong. Um, I think it is. I will grant you the fact, like, the timing is important. It was created by Abraham Lincoln. I think it was Roosevelt that actually said it will be the third or the fourth Thursday of every November. He like
Yeah, I believe
standardized
he,
it
and
because it
even more so, I
bounced
think Lincoln
around.
did make it a national holiday. Yeah, and then it was moved, and there was a big fuck. Everybody threw a fit to destroy the tradition of Thanksgiving, even though it had only been around for like 50 years at that point in time.
Right. Or like
Generation of people. Like, how dare you?
don't mess
But
with
yeah,
my
Roosevelt then decided the exact day that it would be the third.
No, that's interesting. I think there is something to be said about maybe it is as a distraction, or maybe it is like the opposite of that would be maybe in those in such chaotic and desperate times, you need to have something to remind yourself and get around with people that you love. Well, at least that's how my Thanksgivings are, right? I know that a lot of Thanksgivings for a lot of people are not pleasant experiences. I know that it's like a dreaded holiday for, unfortunately, too many people. But maybe the flip side of that is that you needed, especially in 1863, the people needed to be reminded like what's actually important, why it's good to get together and celebrate what you do have with those that you have it. And I don't hate the sentiment of it, because I don't know if you need Thanksgiving is not particularly important to distract us from all of those things. You know what I mean? There's still like we're all distracted of it anyways. And if anything, Thanksgiving is probably the one time that a lot of normies are exposed to these ideas because of the crazy uncle, right? I've had a lot of people spend 364 days of the year in peace. And then along comes Uncle Logan, Uncle Matt, sitting at the kids' table and be like, you know, jet fuel is not hot enough to melt steel. You know?
They
Why
say
we're all
it'll ruin its structural integrity, but all I'm saying is maybe it wouldn't go directly inside, kids. That's all.
Right?
I'm
Maybe
getting at.
maybe it fall off, like it shear off the top and fall
How about
over.
that Building 7 that never caught a plane? Okay, we're going. This is not Thanksgiving talk.
Right, and it's like why were all the carriers outside of Pearl Harbor, kids? You know what I mean?
Awful coincidental that nobody was in dock that day. Wouldn't
Right.
you say?
So it's like, if anything, Thanksgiving might be the one time that a lot of people are like exposed to those ideas, and they get to spend the rest of their year in peace.
That's an interesting thought. I don't hate that. That it gives you, forces you a moment of reflection on those of us who dig a little deeper into truth.
It's the uncomfortable.
Well,
be like,
I like to hear that you're giving some credence to the narrative I crafted, but I made all of that up 40 minutes ago while I was sitting here in front of the computer waiting to get on. It's not something I particularly believe in, but I did thought that was a fun way to open up our lighthearted talks about the holiday season.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a fun thought. I like it. I don't hate it at all.
All right. So as far as Turkey Day topics and Turkey Day thoughts we have, obviously it sounds like you don't have just a whole lot of drama going on in your family. You got a pretty peaceful one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm thankful for that too. I say that a lot when I'm around my two siblings of like, man, especially considering that we came from the part of the world that was like the escape for the Breaking Bad characters when their meth village got too hot and they had to go to a smaller meth village. It's like, isn't it great that none of us are like hopped up on amphetamines or ruining our lives in some extravagant way with drugs and alcohol? Like,
right.
Pretty cool that everybody is like reasonably financially stable here and nobody's absolutely batshit crazy outside of when I talk about politics.
Yeah, but that's not crazy. That's just, you've just taken the pill, brother. You've taken the red, they've taken the blue.
That's what I'm saying.
I
do feel a bit of maybe Jimmy Dore is the number one. I can't think of another example off the top of my head, but I've been listening to Jimmy Dore for a long time as my like leftist view. Like, here's an honest, entertaining lefty that I don't agree with his worldview, but can respect his opinion. It doesn't seem like he's bought off by some large corporate entity,
right,
or the government itself. And watching him kind of like spitting all of the libertarian stuff I was saying 4 years ago just kind of really makes me want to double down on everything I've come to believe. Like, yeah, I am right. Anybody who's honest and studies this long enough will come around to these opinions.
Right. I don't disagree with that either. I think it is by far the more superior. It is like by far like the most intellectually superior political philosophy. I don't disagree with that whatsoever.
which I'm sure everybody thinks of their own political philosophies.
Yeah, well, but we're right
To
and
be
they're
fair,
wrong.
that's why.
And that's the point of the show, about why we're right and why everyone else
That's
is wrong.
exactly. Let everybody know.
Yeah.
So this is a time of year I always like to go around and hop on the Reddit and look up like great dramatic drama family stories that happen during Thanksgiving. I'm not going to beat everybody over the brow with a million Reddit stories, but I did find one that I found the
Please
winner
share.
this year I liked. And it reads, I was 5 or 6 years old. Us kids were playing hide and seek, and I hid way back in the back of Grandma's closet. While I was hiding there, I found a beautiful deep red robe. I assumed it belonged to my grandfather, who had died just a few years before I was born. I tried it on, and it was huge. It was huge on me, but the silk was really smooth and cool. So I decided to ask Grandma if I could have it to grow into it someday. Turns out Grandpa was a Grand Dragon in the Carolina KKK, and it was a ceremonial robe.
Oh, that's amazing.
To bring it out during Thanksgiving feasts, nonetheless.
Oh, yes, dude.
Let's
that type
open
of
this up for the family.
chaos.
It went on
That's
too, like then the like diversity of family dynamics. According to his own story, several family members did know about it and weren't maybe proud of it, but were wanting to sweep it under the rug. So that's a fun conversation to have.
right. Did you know? Did you know? Yes.
Did you know? And how could you say nothing? How could
That's
you give me none of it
all
at
right.
all?
That's fantastic. That's awesome. I'm gonna have to peruse those this evening when we're done. I think
It's a fun one for sure.
yeah, I can only, and I will say that I'm very thankful that all of my Thanksgivings, I think the worst Thanksgiving I've ever had was we went to my grandparents' house in Brownfield, and she needed to get something. My grandmother needed to get something out of like the top cabinet. She stood on a chair, fell, and she broke her arm. And so then we all had to go back home, and I had cereal that night for Thanksgiving. And that's you know what I mean? Like, that's the worst Thanksgiving I've
What
ever
did they do with
had.
all the Thanksgiving food?
We were there early, so it was like the Wednesday before.
Okay.
So it was like, so it would have been
Thanksgiving
like
got canceled.
today. Yeah, so Thanksgiving got
Okay.
canceled, and that was, and so I'm very thankful that is like the worst Thanksgiving I have. Like every other one of them is very uneventful. It's all right. It's all the same cousins, all the same faces. Everyone gets along. There's no drama. There's no fighting. Everyone's happy. You know what I mean? It's like there's no, there's no chaos whatsoever. Like Thanksgivings are very peaceful, stable, boring events in my life. And I think that there's that's something to be thankful for, because I know a lot of people do not get that same experience.
This is a common one I came across and one I've seen in Thanksgivings in my family before. How do you feel about the person who's non-participatory, especially not cooking, but maybe not participatory in Thanksgiving at all, kind of shows up as the meal's ready, packs a gigantic to-go box of food, and then leaves?
Oh, I've never had that happen.
Never
That's
had any of
very,
those?
no, that's very controversial. I don't feel good about that.
It's an interesting one. Most people's sentiment tends to be, hey, it's a holiday, it's family, we're just happy to see them, not a big deal. But man, it incites something inside of me.
Yeah, that one, as soon as you said that, I don't like that. It's like, you son of a bitch, you can at least stay for 30 minutes, right? It's like, you can at least stay for 30 minutes, all right? You can hang out for a minute.
Yeah, let's have a conversation. I think it did. It never happened at a Thanksgiving until I started going to Thanksgivings like inside San Antonio. So it is like a larger city thing. Don't be racist, Matthew. I'm saying it's a city thing.
Oh,
We lived out in
okay.
the country. Our Thanksgivings were in the Podunks. There was nobody to come by at 7 o'clock, whereas these people all live in the same neighborhood. So it's like, I'm going to drive over to my aunt's house and get a plate of food.
All right. I see.
Although, to be fair, those are my first person accounts. I have heard of accounts of relatives that will show up and just to pack the to-go bag.
Not to be a little too on the nose, and their skin tone is darker than yours.
It is, yes.
Okay.
To be fair, as is 98% of the human population.
Okay, that's fair. That's totally fair. I'm not gonna argue. I'm just saying. But I see your point. Maybe it's a cultural thing.
It's for all of them. That's just the family I married into. I'm aware of it.
No, that actually does make sense.
I think it also probably helps that the ones that are doing this in this family are like single dads and kids who are like maybe don't have the nuclear family that raised them, but were kind of raised by the family as a whole and live in the neighborhood. So
Yeah,
it's a little bit of like,
totally fair.
it's
Yeah.
it's not as egregious as like some of the ones I've heard of where like my sister showed up and packed 7 bags of food to go.
And she's like, all right, I'll see you guys next year. Oh, that bitch. Yeah.
Do you have any interesting dynamics within your own family when it comes to the political divide at the dinner table?
No,
Or
not
it's a
really.
classic Protestant West Texas
Yeah,
family?
it's definitely that.
Conversation,
Yeah, it's
not the
definitely
light
like,
conversation that we had.
yeah, it's not like I try not to talk politics with my family. And also I try not to talk politics with most people, to be fair. There's some that I thoroughly appreciate and enjoy talking to, but outside, like, I don't like talking to the normies about politics because it's like I don't want to, it's like it's the equivalent of
What is to
talking to
be
like,
gained?
yeah, it's like the equivalent of talking to like a third grader about something. It's like it's fun. It's like it's surface level fun. But
Right.
it's not that interesting to me.
Yeah, there's not
And
much depth to it.
yeah, and
And
so
you
there,
often run into the layman in politics who will double down on something and refuse to move off of it. And you're like, well, this is the part where I tell you I do a weekly political podcast and we do pay pretty close attention to it. Like, not to appeal to authority, but
yeah, right.
I do follow this pretty closely, and I know you're just telling me I'm wrong, but I'm not wrong.
Right, yeah. And so for that reason, I mean, I don't like it's very like my family's all very like classic Christian conservative. There's various degrees of like how conservative they are, right? And it ranges from like outspoken Zionism to
So, like, what the fuck's Matt doing at the table?
not quite that hard, but it might get there in some regards. This one, like the extended family, right? It's not, that's not the immediate family, but like the extended family. That's probably fair. There is a couple of like liberals in the family, and I think for that I think that my family values like peace and harmony, and over something like, and I appreciate that about my family dynamic. It's like we're not going to let politics ruin today, you know what I mean? And everybody can sit down and stay in their lane. And if somebody says something political, it's my experience is the entire room just doesn't acknowledge it and we move on. And so
That's fair enough. I've found it typically doesn't come out until there's been enough drinks that then the ability to articulate the far right wing conspiracy theory to the younger crowd in the Thanksgiving is no longer there because of the alcohol.
right.
So it's a lot of just like, Michelle's a dude, you got to look into it.
Trust me.
A lot of that.
Do your research, okay?
So I guess the other thing I would mention before we get completely outside of the realm of Thanksgiving holiday cheer is just some interesting factoids I came up with looking into Thanksgiving today and looking for anything interesting to say on it. One thing I thought was particularly interesting. So the first Thanksgiving allegedly was not a meal, but rather a festival and sort of a peace offering, right?
Is this before we gave them the measles blankets or after?
I think they probably had received some measles blankets, but it was not beknownst to us that the measles were being spread.
Okay.
To them, the Puritans. I don't know why I say we. It's a habit I've tried to get out of. We, like I was there. So it was a lot of like, everybody knows there wasn't turkeys, right? That was a misnomer that came later. It was rather deer and a lot of seafood stuff. I found interesting that the Pilgrims, when the natives did like dances and some wrestling competitions and all sorts of things you do at a festival to entertain crowds, the Pilgrims decided it was a good time to like go through some military exercises and fire their muskets as a little show of strength to the natives. Just so you guys know, we got these muskets on point. So don't try no savage stuff. I just love that was like their form of entertainment was like military exercises and reading scripture about how these natives are all going to hell for being dirty savages and haven't received the word of Jesus Christ yet.
Oh, as all good traditions start.
Now, being that these were pilgrims which is not exactly the same thing as Puritans, but very similar, like very pent up crowd.
Yeah.
They had buckles on their shoes, so you wouldn't see their dirty ankles, that kind of crowd. And that alcohol was not well known with the natives yet, and so I'm sure the pilgrims wouldn't be apt to take into any kind of peyote type ceremonies or whatever might have been going on in that region. But we're talking about a 3-day festival of having parties and getting, I wanted to say getting drunk because that's what I do at festivals, eating a lot of food and potentially some on the side taking dinner. Do you think any of those dirty pilgrim girls crossed the line and found them a nice, strong native gentleman?
Yeah, I bet they stepped out of line, and when they got caught, they said it wasn't consensual.
The classic non-consensual. I didn't see that answer coming, but yes, you're probably right. I was bewitched by the devil, and maybe a little bit of that loincloth over there. I think the last pressing, interesting factoid I'd found was the Mayflower, and I forgot to look up what type of ship the Mayflower was, but apparently it was not a intercontinental long sea voyaging type of ship. And it was not really meant to transport these people, but they were kind of pressed by persecution religiously to jump on the boat and get the hell out of there.
Okay.
So when they arrived in this nation, it was like a true modern day Christian miracle delivered by God to the new world, to this land that they were supposed to colonize in their own minds. I thought it was interesting because in this particular little documentary series I was listening to about Thanksgiving, it was obviously very left-leaning, so they were hammering on like in the echoes of this Pilgrim and Puritanian thinking still reigns through American policy today, and much of what we are today is because of this, which is true to an extent. But I thought it was very interesting that they hammer home of like how much this influences our culture today, and all I could think is like we have an entire month dedicated to sodomy now. Like how pervasive do you think this Puritanian thinking is still in our policies? I also thought one of the things they mentioned with this is like everything was a sign from God to the pilgrims. That sin itself manifested in bad karma, essentially, and God bringing down judgment upon the people. So I just thought, like, man, I wonder what they would think of modern day California, like how fucking beautiful it is out there. The amount of non-puritanical behavior that's going on.
Yeah, they would. I mean, they would lose their shit if they could see everything that was going on. Like, I mean, the fact that there's just ankles out in public everywhere, and more than just ankles, right? It's like, oh my heavens.
Yeah, we're having like free the nipple conversations now.
Yeah,
like,
right.
We're not covering anything anymore.
Yeah. I like those. There's some good little facts.
Some fun Thanksgiving thoughts there.
Yeah.
That's about all I got. I don't know if you had any specific
Thanksgiving. Yeah, I got just one. It's one of my like favorites, like little stories of history. And I think that it goes to show you, and when like Japan and Germany finally figured like this was the show, like if they already knew that they were going to lose, but when this happened, it solidified in everyone's mind. Like we are just so outclassed, we're outgunned, we're out, like we cannot win. And so Roosevelt thought it was very important in 1944 that every U.S. troop, no matter where they were, at any theater in the world, received a Thanksgiving dinner of turkey, some cranberry. There's actually, I'll find the YouTube video. There's this guy who's like, I think it's eating history or cooking history, where he goes back in time and like makes the meals of like, so he makes like blood bread of the Vikings. He recreates this Thanksgiving one, and the amount of material that was mobilized, it ended up being like 1.7 million turkeys that the government put out a mandate earlier in the year to try to make sure that they had enough turkeys to actually feed all these troops. And so
you got to start breeding turkeys for that kind of effort.
Yeah, and it actually created this black market for turkeys because the government was taking up all the turkeys. And so the turkey price shot up that year because somebody's like, oh, I'd like a turkey. And the guy's like, yeah, $30, you know? And it's like, otherwise the government's going to get it. And so there's like this little black market that's created, like a government intrusion. What a surprise. But they ended up doing, so there was this, they ended up having several refrigerated ships, and the entire purpose of these ships were to just keep food frozen. And they sent some in the Pacific, they sent some in the Atlantic. And there was 2 convoys. I mean, this is the amount of energy and effort that went into it. You had entire convoys of multiple ships to keep food frozen, to protect said ships, and to mobilize to make sure that every US soldier, no matter where they were, got a Thanksgiving meal. And the logistical endeavor of mobilizing hundreds of thousands of tons of food for one meal had to make every German and Japanese person demoralized. The Germans are like sitting across from us in like Western Belgium and be like, does anyone have any extra shoes? Does anyone have
Right.
it's like, does anyone have a belt in America? It's just like, we're getting Thanksgiving meal. You know what I mean? It's like, we're going to get a warm Thanksgiving meal, motherfucker. And
Yeah,
they're
that
just like, we're so hungry.
boiled leather strap soup never tasted so bad as when you can smell turkey across the other trench.
And the Americans just like having a heyday because and it's like there's another story of the Japanese of like there wasn't a lot of Japanese captured on Iwo Jima, right? It's fight to the last man, all that good stuff. But some of the ones that were captured, there's reports after of them being just blown away that how the Americans were living on the island, right? So they're shuttled across the other side of the island and they're like, dude, we've been eating grubs and living off like a bag of moldy rice. And there's an ice cream boat in the harbor. Like they have an entire, like, we don't have enough boats to even like bring us like aid or food
We don't
or
have
more
rations, period.
Exactly. And it's just like they have an entire boat for ice cream. That is like we are so out, and that's one of my favorite stories of just like the might of American logistics. Now, we are not good at winning the peace, but we are very good at winning total wars, and it is that American like logistical industrial capacity to just mobilize an entire country to be like every soldier will get a Thanksgiving meal this year. And I like that story because it's like the ultimate flex. It's like not only are we going to firebomb your cities, not only are you know what I mean, not only we're going to drop 2 suns on you here pretty soon, guys, like not only all of these other things, but just to show you how superior we are, we can give all of our guys a special meal. That's how out of league you are. That's how bad you're going to lose. You can't even feed your troops, and we will give 4 million servicemen a special meal today. Checkmate.
Do you know anything about the logistics of the cooks for that? Did it just go to whoever's close enough to cook it? I'm sure obviously there's somebody cooking food.
Well, so yeah, so like on all the ships, right? So if you're in the Pacific theater, it went down to all of just like the cooking, just whoever the cooks on the ships. And
Right.
so what they would do is they would cook it. They cooked most of the meals on ships, and then they put them on landing crafts, and then they send them on shore. And so then
imagine being a cowering Japanese man, seeing all these amphibious marine war machines roll up, and you're like, oh fuck, and like getting down when you're supposed to be spying on the back lines, and you see them unloading just Thanksgiving. Here's a cornucopia of meal.
It's just like, and you haven't eaten anything. Like you've been living off the insects around you for weeks, and then here come these big meals. Now there's a kind of a
they brought a bird from across the world that does not exist on this continent.
It's impressive, and I think that is like it's one of the biggest. It's like I think it's one of the best flexes that America has ever done in war. I know that we've got some pretty like strong ones, but that one to me is like a subtle, just you were so outclassed that you can't like you thought that you could win. Like you really thought that with your industry, you could outproduce us. Like we can mobilize an entire, like we can shift our entire society. We can dedicate not even a small portion of our war effort to make sure that all of these guys get one special meal, and it doesn't affect anything else about anything else that we're doing. We're still rolling off thousands of tanks, thousands of planes, hundreds of thousands of bullets and bombs every day, and they get turkey too.
And turkey on top. Imagine being the strategic general on the other side, and you're like up night after night, losing sleep at this losing war effort, and you're trying to find any type of in to make an inroad to victory, and the Americans are planning out Thanksgiving on their side. Like, Jesus, what the fuck are we gonna do? It's dismissive. It's like the question of us winning this war is not a question if we're worried about who's eating turkey on what day.
Right. And our generals were more concerned about the morale drop if they don't get this meal because they've been promised this meal, right? It's like, oh my goodness, how am I supposed to tell my troops that like there's no things like we've been telling them about that, right? It's like that's what they're worried about. They're not worried about like making sure the morale's high to keep them in the fight or anything like that. It's like, oh, they're going to be really pissed at their commanding officers if they don't get turkey.
The drag queen NSO show soon. These guys might be pissed at us,
right? Yeah, and I mean, at this point, like the German high command is planning Battle of the Bulge, which I'm not to detour, but that's like truly a waste of min material. Like, right? It's like that's how bad it is that you're going to waste your last strategic reserve on some like notion that bad weather is going to help you race all the way through Belgium to cut off, and you know what I mean? It's like that's what the Germans are dealing with, and the Americans are just like, we need to feed our boys turkey today.
How long does turkey stay good once it's cold? How do we
right? Do we need to? And it's like I know that they didn't make these ships, but the fact that we have like refrigerator ships, right? Like we have entire boats dedicated to just keeping things frozen, and the Japanese have no like they can't even, I mean, they have to use kamikaze because they have no more boats. Like we've blown them all up. The Germans are, the Germans have they have no more. They're like they don't even have shoes and coats for a lot of their soldiers, and two fronts are collapsing. And Americans are just like, yeah, we have ice cream boats.
Absolutely overwhelmed by this invading force from across the world, and you've been fighting to the point where you're surrounded in your plane. You probably aren't going to make it back to base. You've run out of ammo, and you decide to kamikaze one ship, at least take one of these fuckers out with you. And right before you hit it, you realize it's the fucking ice cream ship you took out.
It's like it's like the waste of life, but also it's like the devastation of the soldiers on like, no, that was the ice cream boat. Like
might cause a backlash. Honestly, it might be a couple weeks of even worse treatment from the American troops.
Right? It's like
you took our ice cream.
We will take no prisoners.
I don't get ice cream this week. You never taste ice cream again.
It's like we will take no more prisoners as reprisal for the blowing up of our ice cream ship. It's like, why are you doing this? You took our cream.
You took our ice cream. That is interesting. I mean, I'm sure there's an argument in there about like high morale and keeping things going and having this kind of a logistics infrastructure that can make these insane things happen.
Yeah, it's it is.
But ice cream seems above and beyond.
Well, and I think that's that was the thing that blew the Japanese prisoner away the most, right? It's not the fact, like, yes, I'm sure that all of those things were. I think it'd be very disheartening to find out like how well equipped your enemy is, but to know that in the midst of this like hellhole of Iwo Jima, they have ice cream, right? Like there is like, if you get away from the front line, like there are luxuries of life on this hellhole island that Americans just, you know what I mean? Soldiers in rotation can come back and they can shower, and there's ice cream. I mean, that is like the pinnacle of logistical superiority in the middle of the tropical heat of Iwo Jima. They have ice cream. It's
like the logistical torture method of only feeding Japanese prisoners hacky American sushi. Here's your California roll.
It's the cream cheese doesn't belong on sushi. No.
We call this one a Philadelphia roll. Also, the indignity of suffering this false sushi.
Also, leave the Philly to put cream cheese on sushi. Like that is one of the most Philly things ever. Shame on them.
Shame on Philly. I'm gonna give Philly a little bit of a break on this one, in that I don't hate the hacky American sushis all over the place. Some of them are good. I don't mind a little sour cream on the right one. And I only say that giving Philly a break to double back on how much I hate Philly personally, and think they're all just garbage people.
Yeah, it's a horrible city.
The worst people.
It's every
It's not the
and
city's fault. It's the infestation within the city.
it's the inhabitants of the city. It's their fault. It's
Right, right. Yeah, it's an erosion of culture at the base level of
yeah, but that's my Thanksgiving. This is my
your
one little
tidbit.
tidbit of Thanksgiving. I always like that story. Just know that it was over, and everybody knew it at that point. Like if they can mobilize that, it's yeah. Like what hope do we have? The Russians are coming, the Americans are coming, and there's things they get Thanksgiving. It's like what the fuck are we doing? Like why are we still fighting? And there's also I love all the I'll just say this last thing and then we can move on. I love all the alternative histories where they're like, oh, if Hitler wouldn't have done this or if Germany would have done this, they would have won the war. And then the next meme is just like Berlin, August 45, and it shows an atomic bomb on it. It's just like, no, you guys were always going to lose. At a certain point, it was inevitable. We're just working out how many people have to die.
You should have quit at the turkeys. It would have
Yeah.
been a good off ramp, guys. Well, while we're talking about logistics and governmental efficiency, this seems like a good segue into kind of what we wanted to get into today. Uh, we were talking a little bit about DOGE, this Department of Governmental Efficiency, and this is something that's obviously seen a lot of cheering and fist pumps from the libertarian types like ourselves. And it is an idea that I find very exciting and very encouraging. I've often said that the worst part of our government is the bloat within it, and that there is a lot of even as a libertarian and as probably a self-prescribed anarchist, I would say that there are programs that I would hold off on cutting because hey, there's plenty of time to get to these things, but there is such an enormous amount of inefficiencies within the bureaucracy that is our federal government, and obviously in spending as well, as our debt only increases every year. Even comically, I've forgotten the number now, but it's something like 650 million or $1 billion in interest on the debt we owe every year that just keeps tacking on these unfathomable amounts of money. But I don't know that we've taken a good, strong look into DOGE and what it means now that it's actually in front of us. Trump did win the presidency. He's moving forward with this. What is DOGE and what are the things we need to watch out for, things we should be concerned about, and I guess look forward to as well. But where do you want to start on DOGE?
Yeah, I think that we can start with like what it's going to be and when it's not going to be. And of course, right, there's still some time for this to materialize and get a better understanding of it, but it's not going to be like an official federal agency, right? It's not going to be an official part of the government. And that's good because in my heart of hearts, if they were going to unconstitutionally create a new department, I would have, you know what I mean? Like, even though I'm down with the process, I would not have been stoked about it's like, oh, we scream about all of these agencies and bureaucracies that are unconstitutional, shouldn't exist. I would have been upset if they're like, and we're going to create like the government, like the department, and it's going to actually be federal agencies. Like, you guys, it's like, you guys
what a great way for the powers that be, the bureaucracy and the military industrial complex, the swamp, I guess, for lack of a better word. What a great way for them to spit in our faces, though, to take a new federal department called the Department of Government Efficiency. And then when they take back the House and the Senate and the presidency and take it out of the hands of this wild man Trump, it just becomes another absolute drain on our tax dollars. Right. And they refuse to shut it down just out of like, this is what you get for coming after the federal government. Now you have to pay taxes to this too.
Out of spite, right? Yeah, and so it's going to be like a advisory role, right? And I think that it's important to separate kind of the logistics, and these are things that I quite don't fully have my head wrapped around because the budgetary process of the government is so complex and convoluted, which probably leads to a lot of these inefficiencies, maybe by design, maybe by just the creeping bloat of government, right? I don't think that you necessarily have to have a malicious intent for this to get out of control.
I was going straight to malicious intent. I was about to go on this tirade about it. What better way to hide the money you're stealing than to make it difficult to read? Of course, you can't understand legalese. It's because they don't want you to.
That's fair. That's totally fair. And so this is going to be an advisory role to the president. And I've been listening to some people talk, some and this has been coming from like a center left perspective. I've heard some center right names I need to look into, but mainly the voices I've heard are like from the center left, and it's not even their concern, it's just kind of the way they stake it out. It's like, okay, so Congress has the power of the purse that is delegated to them in the Constitution. It is the separation of powers, and so there's only so much the president can actually do when it comes to dealing with the budget. Now, the budget, like the president can veto the budget, he can sign the budget. There's some, you're right, there's some discretionary funds that the president does have control over, but because Doge is going to advise directly to the president, we're going to get into this interesting and probably like full out legal battle that will end up in the Supreme Court about the powers of the president and how, and like, what is it like, can he impound this money legally, can he not? And so like the Impounding Act of 1974 was Congress's way of like codifying Nixon, like saying like, Nixon, you can't do this, because Nixon started this during his presidencies. Like, Congress would fund a program and Nixon be like, well, I'm just not going to spend any of that money. And so then he ended up losing a bunch of legal challenges in the courts of this. And
that's the way you actually get removed as a president. It's not any atrocities or any sexual misconducts or how many people you kill. It's as soon as you tell them they can't spend your tax dollar, that's when they get you the fuck out of there.
Right. Maybe you're onto something there. And so Nixon kept getting, you're right. So like he lost all of his legal battles, and Congress created the Impounding Act of 74, and so essentially it says like, if Congress appropriates and funds any sort of program, department, any line item in their budget, the president does not have the authority to withhold that money. And if we can stretch back into our little history pullouts there, that's what President Trump got in trouble the first time that he was impeached in 2020? Or was that 2019? I can't remember. The first time he was impeached, it was about withholding money that Congress had appropriated for aid to Ukraine, and then that we get the quid pro quo, yada yada, investigate Burisma, and there's all of that stuff. But really, the meat and potatoes of it is that President Trump violated the Impounding Act of 1974, which says like, hey, if Congress appropriates this money, the president doesn't get to say, well, you can't spend it.
Yeah, you've been found in violation of the Anti-War Act that doesn't allow you to step in front of Lockheed Martin making their profits, sir.
Sure. Not wrong.
Yeah, it does seem like, and I've heard Vivek several times say, like, hey, all these programs were created through executive action without the approval of Congress, and that's how they're going to be solved here too. So it does seem like everything I've heard, even the critics of it, do see this playing out the way you laid out, where it's not going to be necessarily executive orders and congressional changes. It's going to be more of kind of what we had with Roe v. Wade, of like, hey, does the federal government even have the authority to make this kind of law over people, or to decide the way this tax money is spent in this case? To which case you get to kick it over to everybody. What everyone on MSNBC will tell you is like this horrifically biased right-wing Supreme Court, which, not saying that they're not more right-leaning than left at this point.
Well, they're certainly conservative. Of course they are.
Right. But there's this sentiment of like how horrible of a thing it is. I don't hate the kind of framework of that. I think that it makes sense, and that if we're going to be truly cutting down on this without creating an entirely new governmental agency and making some gigantic overhaul, that's kind of the way you do this within the framework that already exists. I also think that's important because you can, is your plan to make some stuff happen right now, or is your plan to change the system for the future? Because we don't know who's going to be in there in the future. You got 4 years of Trump. It's only so much time, and only 2 years guaranteed of having the House and the Senate where you might actually be able to push a lot of this through.
Yeah, and I think that it's going to be really interesting to see how this actually plays out, because, and I know that there'll probably be like some select subcommittees created in the House and the Senate to kind of be a part of it, because
in fact, already have named like the heads of those committees. I saw.
Okay, interesting.
the names of either, but both the House and the Senate have a subcommittee in charge of working directly with Doge.
Right, and you have to do that, right? And because you do have like there's different budget processes, and this is now like getting into the weeds. And I learned a lot of this stuff being in like local government. Now, granted, our line items are a lot smaller than what we're dealing with at the federal government, but right, but you have like a reconciliation process, and there has to be some sort of like I think what I'm most interested is like how far is the president actually going to be able to go before it just gets tied up in legal challenges? Because even, and I do agree with like Vivek, where it's like a lot of these agencies and a lot of this bloat was created by executive order. That's totally fair, and so it should be able to be undone by executive order. But where I think where it's interesting and where it's going to get super convoluted, and where like legal scholars, like constitutional scholars, like budgetaries, like lawyers, all of these people that make ungodly amounts of money, they're going to end up arguing in front of the Supreme Court, because you're going to get, it's like, yeah, okay, it was, this department was created by executive action, but Congress funds this. They have appropriated money, and the president cannot over like there's a clear separation of powers. Congress controls the purse. And so yeah, and so I'm really curious to see like that legal battle that I think is going to play out of this. It's like, okay, well, where is the actual power going to lie? And it's like, yeah, they did create it, they can undo it by federal by executive order, but Congress has actually funded it, and therefore, because of these other laws that are in place, the president just doesn't get to say, nope, you can't spend that money. And so it's going to be this. So there are going to be some law firms. They're going to make so much money, so much money off this. Because it's ultimately, I think it's just going to end up in this very convoluted legal argument that you're going to need, like you're going to need people like Ellie Honig and Dan Abrams to like dumb it down for the rest of us to sit there and take these very myopic legal challenges and say like, okay, when they say this is what they mean in like common speak.
It reminds me a lot of like and just kind of another good example of what we're always harping on, that like the incentives of government, the incentives of everybody in that building making decisions, is to just give themselves more power on both sides of the aisle, no matter what position they're in. Like it's very rare that you get a Thomas Massey or a Rand Paul that's in there like talking about not spending the money and how do we lessen this. And it makes me think of like Congress is the only branch of government that has the power to declare war. However, we've had plenty of military occupied exercises and special military,
Police
whatever
actions.
fancy word, police action, whatever the phrase is they need to do to get troops on the ground in countries where they're not technically at war. And yet we put military troops and armaments and battlements and take over areas. And then we've had also now the precedence that's been set that when Donald Trump wanted to pull out of war, Congress would not allow him to do so without going in front of Congress. So this safeguard that was supposed to be the only way we go to war is if this congressional body of representatives decides that, yes, it is necessary, then they can declare war. We've found plenty of ways now for government to go decide whatever war they want to get into, whatever monetary pursuits they're interested in, and whatever resources they want to hoover up. There's several different ways to figure out how to get that war started. But if you decide that you want to yank troops out, it's very convoluted. It's hard to figure that out without the permission of all of these people who are paid off by Lockheed Martin.
No doubt. And I do not disagree with that sentiment. And I think it goes to show why a program like this, whether this one is perfect or not, whether it will be legal or not, why the endeavor is worth pursuing, because it's always very easy for government and entities to add power, to take power, but they never want to relinquish it. And that's what Doge is. It is a direct challenge to go through and make the federal government, and it doesn't, and I think we can just like paint it with a broad brush. It's both the executive branch, it's the judicial branch, it is the Congress, the legislative branch. It is trying to comb through that and try to strip away some power. And you're going to see like a lot of pushback to that, because the status quo does not like to be challenged. It's a very simple basic principle of power dynamics. Those in charge never like to give up power. And I mean, I like the endeavor. I'm not here to tell you that Doge is bad. I'm really, yeah, I think it's good because you should. And there's some very blatant things that you could cut down on, right? And I think that probably the biggest one is probably procurement, right? Like, and you sit there and you say, like, okay, Elon says I want to cut $2 trillion. I have no idea where he came up with that number. I don't think that we'll ever get any sort of reasonable answer from Vivek or Elon about why 2 trillion is the goal. Maybe it's just a nice round number that sounds good. That's kind of my feeling on it. And I don't think we're ever going to get like any sort of like intellectually compelling reason why 2 trillion needs to be the number. However, I think that if you could just start with, and it's not, and this is where like I lean towards like maybe my statist hat. I don't think it is, but it's like, it's not the fact that it's government is like that it is spending money. It's like what it's spending it on, right? I think that's probably where we could start with. Now, in a perfect world, 10 years down the road, if you could find a way that, oh my goodness, we've eliminated government waste, and like look at how awesome our country is. I'm not going to be opposed to that, but if you could like start by like, I don't know, eliminating procurement fraud, figuring out why does a certain bolt for like, why does the soap dispensers for, you know, certain airplanes cost $450, right?
Why
Like
did your coffee table in your office cost 70 grand?
right. It's like there's a lot of like very basic waste that you could eliminate, and I think if like you could procurements are going to be a huge chunk of that, right? And I think that that's probably the best place to start, because other programs start getting into some other, like if you start looking at Medicare, Medicaid, VA, those type of things. So now it's like Logan and I were talking about this before, and we can dive into this a little bit deeper if you want to. But it's like when you start getting into those programs, not that I'm a huge fan of those programs. I am down with the VA, right? The government creates veterans. They should take care of veterans, full stop. So I'm not here to say there, but there's waste in the VA that you could eliminate, right? Like instead of, because I know, like I have friends that are veterans, and right. So like if you could reduce administrative cost and actually make sure that people get the health care that they need because the government sent them to fight wars and fuck them up, well then yeah, I'm down with it. So it's like, so I'm not here to say like let's get rid of the VA, but it's when you start talking about like these like entitlement programs of Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, all that stuff, I don't like the fact that if you start cutting those programs, like we've already robbed them of their money, right? The government's already said if you don't take
it's very similar to kind of what we said about the immigration thing of like, I'm worried it becomes a number game. And that,
right.
hey, I really want to hit this 2 trillion. And with the example of immigration, it's like, what's the easiest way for me to get my numbers up? I'm going to go to every kitchen in this city and take the entire line and just scrutinize these people who have acquired illegally a social security number. So if they could work legally in this country, well, you know,
I know what you mean. I know what you mean.
You know what I'm saying? Get at, and their taxes are being pulled out of that. They're paying into the system.
They're paying into the system.
They're part of the community. They're making the restaurants run. They're making feedlots run. Like there's a lot of industries that are really dependent on that labor force. That's going to be, now you're going out of your way to hit this number and you're not actually addressing the problem. Right. The problem is not the people who are in this country paying taxes. Those guys are I mean, if you've been working in this country for 10 years, paying taxes the entire time under a fake social security number, and you don't have a criminal record, like you can be a citizen for all.
I don't care. Yeah, for sure. Might as well. Yeah. Like, at that point, make him a citizen.
Right. You've made the point that you're a good, upstanding human being. We don't have any problem with that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do worry a little bit about that of like, how much caution's in this? How much? I do think a great bright side to this perhaps is, even if this all gets tied up in court and goes nowhere, if they don't cut a single dollar out of it, at least they're holding a mirror up to it. There will be an opportunity for Americans to see a lot of these inefficiencies and and especially another great positive is how much they've been talking about, and I haven't seen the exact parameters on this, but how much they want to be completely transparent with this and have all of this kind of documented online so that you can read it in lifetime about what they're trying to cut, what are the inefficiencies they're seeing within this. So even if this all does get absolutely kiboshed in the end and nothing happens, it will at least give us this opportunity to look into the grotesque underbelly of the government spending and go like, hey, maybe it just wakes up a couple more people, a couple more voters out there to going like, wait a minute, what are we spending this money on? And why is there not a single political party that will talk about this on debate stage?
Absolutely. I agree with that 100%. And that's like, I am all down for eliminating government waste, the inefficiencies. I'm down. I guess I just don't want to see like regular folks harmed by this, right? Like if you're 70 years old and you've worked your entire life and you've paid into Social Security, I don't want to see your Medicare and your Social Security cut, right? It's like they already forcibly took that money from you at threat of violence in a cage, and so you're entitled to like pennies back on your dollar from the person that took your money. You know what I mean? Like I get it that it's not a perfect system, but it's like I don't want to see those type of things affected, because that's where I think when we start talking about policies, that oftentimes is lost is that there's real ramifications to real people about this.
Right. In the same way, I would love to walk back a lot of the social safety nets we have in this country because they're bloated and then therefore incentivize people to take advantage of
Sure.
them. I don't want every person to not have their EBT card tomorrow. I understand
Right.
there are people in situations that need it. And I would love to find a future where there's a better way for us to make sure that it's appropriated in a good manner, in an honest manner, and that people are taken care of. I'm just skeptical that the government's the right way to do that personally. But at the same time, this is the safety net we have in place, and I don't want to yank it out from under everybody right away. And day one, be like, good fucking luck.
No doubt. And I think that's like, you are right. There is probably a better way to organize it at the end of the day. And so that's what, and I hope, right? Because I think that you can probably find a lot. I know you can. I know you can find a lot of waste, right? Like there's some horrible government programs out there. There's a lot of redundancy. I mean, one thing I'm curious what the federal government pays in rent and like lease payments and mortgage payments of federal buildings that are sitting empty right now. I mean, how like right there, like how many? Because like if federal workers, especially after COVID, were allowed to work from home, and I'm not saying that like federal workers need to go back to the office. I don't know. I don't really care, to be honest. It's like, but right there. I mean, I wonder what the government's like. How many big federal buildings are sitting across this country with less than 50% occupancy, less than 10% of like, right? Like how many hundreds of millions of dollars of taxpayer monies are going to pay for buildings that aren't being used? I mean, if we could, like that's a good
Sell
use
them to
of
BlackRock already. They're buying everything else.
they already own everything else. So like we might as well give it to them. Like they are BlackRock and Vanguard are monopolies, and we shouldn't even argue that they're not, right? Like let's just come out and acknowledge that
you just said two names. You already contradicted yourself. It's fine. There's two of them.
Oh, perfect. I'm glad that those two.
How duopolies work really well in our system. Like we love black and white.
That's
just decide one of them's the good guy and one's the bad guy and support one. That's the option.
We call that price fixing, where a bunch of people conspire to share their monopoly of the market. Where they're like, hey, why are we competing against each other? Let's just work together and we'll have it all, and nobody's going to be the wiser.
I couldn't imagine the two corporations that own every single bit of property that isn't privately owned in this country could be conspiring with each other.
That, to be fair, I think you're probably right. Because also,
I mean, you're talking about two boardrooms that have to be on board. That's like 20 people, and
at least a third of them are women, So, so yeah, you're right. You're totally right. Because
what's your sympathy level for the employees of the government that are going to be losing their jobs over this?
It's a non-zero number. I think that I understand why certain people like government jobs aren't bad jobs. Like let's take my municipality, for example, right? Like if you, you can make a good, right? You're not going to get rich off a municipal job, right? But you can make decent money. The village pays well. You work 20 years and you get your full pin. You know what I mean? It's like a 95% pension for the rest of your life if you do 20 years here. So it's, it's like that's a good job. I understand why somebody would do that job. And there's some definitely like there's some fluctuations of it where there's a difference between the person that's out there like digging ditches on the road crew or trying to fix the water pipes versus somebody that's sitting in an office. But the people that sit in the office are doing a job too. It's not a non-zero number because those people, I'm sure there's a lot of just regular folk that went to work because of it, because it's a government job, because it's decent pay, it's great benefits,
And a great
and
pension. That's the biggest one. Like I
and
totally
they're
get why people hunt out those jobs,
yeah,
like you said, that you're taken care of when you're done.
for sure.
Retirement is guaranteed.
And I don't think that your average, like, I think the issue lies more so with like the directors of certain departments, managers versus just like your person that took a job because you know what I mean. Like if you're just if you go to work and it's your job, like I don't expect like why should you be held responsible for what your boss told you to do? And so I have large sympathy for those people. The people that have been managing these programs, the people that have been pushing Congress to appropriate money for their departments, probably knowing that it's not all that important or they've convinced themselves that it's very important. I don't have a lot of sympathy for those people. So it's twofold.
Depends on the color.
Yeah. Depends on how high up the chain you are. Like if you're just like
Do
if
you
you're
have
just
a
some
button-up shirt or are you wearing a t-shirt to work? Which,
yeah, it's like if you're just like if it's just your job and you've done it because that's the job that like that sucks. That sucks that like two really rich dudes just came in here and said that you're a waste. Like that's pretty shitty.
I was thinking about this too. How many employees are losing their job, and how much does that hurt you in the next election once you're the party that removed these people from their employment?
Well, I what's the what's the amount of federal government that votes? Like I think the federal government overwhelmingly already votes blue.
That was my first thought too. It's not, at least the only number I could find was an article from the 2022 midterm said 46% to 35% were voting blue
Mm,
versus red. That's also, during a Joe Biden midterm. So maybe those numbers are
right.
higher if you have a salient, amicable presidential candidate leading the charge rather than a
Yeah.
bumbling grandfather.
All right, so there's one for okay, here's 2022. Federal employees slightly prefer Democrats. Um, yeah, I would say that. Oh, so here's one from a little bit earlier, November. Oh, this is recent. Federal employees donated $4.2 million in the presidential race in 2024, and 84% of that went to Kamala Harris.
There you go. So
So
yeah, that was you sniffed that out immediately. I was hoping you would think a little harder on it before you got to that, but that was my first thought on it is like, yeah, they're all Democrats anyway.
right, who cares? Democrats aren't
what
people.
self what self-respecting conservative works for the government? Ron
Over
Swanson's a cute character. Nobody actually respects that guy in real life.
right. It's like I think the only department that's like so I guess if you count law
Ours.
enforcement, that is law
That's a good
enforcement
thought.
overwhelmingly is Republican, like the FBI, right? Like the FBI is overwhelmingly Republican. In fact, like there's never been a Democratic leader of the FBI. They've all been Republicans, even under
Really?
yeah, even under Democratic presidents. And so when people are like, "Oh, the DOJ is weaponized against Republicans," it's like, okay, I guess Chris Wray is a self-hating Republican. You know what I mean? There's those have always been some arguments. I'm like, I don't know, like, is the FBI like actually that? It's like it's overwhelmingly Republican.
Just as to steal me on the other side, I would say that it's because they're not going after the Republican Party. They're going after this one guy who's an interloper within that party who's
It's
talking
totally
about.
fair.
But that's popped in my
Yeah,
head. Thought I
no,
was going to say.
that's totally fair, and I will concede that. You know what I mean? Like, I hear you, and I agree. So yeah, what about you? Like, where your sympathies lie?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly, and much to what you said there. There's a lot of people. It's not necessarily your fault. It's like those unwashed savages that the Pilgrims came up against. It's not your fault you hadn't heard the word of Jesus yet. You're just it's it's not everyone's responsibility I guess it is, and maybe it is everyone's responsibility to have a studied and like measured out political view and ideology, so that you're not swayed by these things. But I guess I don't expect that from everyone, especially if you're, some low level governmental employee. I don't think it's really your fault, and it sucks that you're going to lose your job. Um, but I don't know. I feel sympathy for them, but at the same time, it doesn't make me want to slow down this train a tiny bit at all, because this is a necessary wound to get to the healing stage. It feels like
Okay, so
you go.
no, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I was going to button up what I had just said with saying the exact same thing, essentially.
Okay, fair enough. So I think that that's a very important aspect of this to point out, and I've been talking about, like, we need to stop looking at politics as like A and B, black and white. It's all a very complex trolley problem. It's track A goes down this lane, and these are the consequences of it, where we get track B. And so now we're talking about pulling track B, and part of it is like these are the conversations I think that we should be having as if you wanted philosophically important conversations about politics, this is what we should be talking about. Secondary, tertiary effects of, okay, Elon and Vivek do this. Cool. How do we feel about regular people that have just had a job? Is it their fault? Are we okay with them now losing their job because of this? You know what I mean? And I don't say that was like, is that a good thing or a bad thing? It's like, yes or no? Are we okay with it? If we are okay with it,
everything comes with a price.
Right. Do we have a plan to try to, yeah, it's like, do they get a severance? Are they just like, sorry, tough titties, your department's been found, like unimportant? Like,
learn to code, loser.
At this point, it's like, learn how to coal mine, because all the
a lot of lithium mine industry opening up the next couple decades.
There's a lot of coders that are struggling to find jobs, especially now with AI. So it's like, yeah, learn how to coal mine, loser. But I think that's like, these are the conversations that should be having about just all of the effects of it. And at this point, I don't even know if there's right or wrong answers, and I'm not certainly smart enough or morally superior enough to definitively say that this is right or wrong. But it's like, we just have to decide, like, are we okay with this as a society? Like, are we okay with a bunch of regular people who just go to work and are trying to provide for their family and are facing the exact same struggles that you and I face? Are we okay with throwing those people out into the world because of like trying to reduce government waste? And it's, it's like, if we are, okay. If we're not, okay. Then, and based on each of those answers, what do we do about it?
Maybe rather than a severance pay or a pension given out to these people who are losing their job, which would obviously kind of be a step in the wrong direction if you're talking about government efficiency and spending. Now you're giving these people money just to go away. So it's like, what did you really accomplish?
Well, it depends on what the pension is.
Long-term plan.
You know what I mean? If it's an employee that's still got 10 more years and you're going to pay him a year's salary, that's huge savings.
Right. So rather than spending any of that money, do you think maybe they just reappropriate them into the temporary swelling of help that they're going to obviously need to deport every single brown person for this country?
So it's like, hey, I know that you've been working this nice cushy desk job. Could I interest you a position in the kitchen of Torchy's Tacos?
I was talking ICE agents, but yeah, there you go. We can throw you in the back and get you going. God, I can't imagine going from hardworking South American employees who are trying to support their family to listless, no callus on their hands, government employees who have been a bureaucrat for their entire life, who have very strong opinions because they've been sitting behind a desk doing 10 hours of work a week and reading social media for the last 20 years. Like that's the worst kind of employee. You don't want those at all.
Yeah, no doubt. And it's going to be, I think what's important to keep in mind throughout all of this is like, yes, there's a lot of government waste that needs to be reduced. It's as simple as that. And unfortunately, there's going to be collateral damage, right? There's going to be good, hardworking people that have actually been like doing something. They're going to get wrapped up in this. And that sucks. And I don't have an answer for that because there's no way to, right? Like there's no way to, it's like I have friends they used to be in the military, and one's an old intelligence officer, and said there's no way to run a casualty-free mission. It's just built into it that whatever you do, someone's not going to come back. And I think that approach, it's realistic and it has to be applied here. But I do have to point out, I think it just sucks. I think it sucks because there's going to be like probably some people there, I don't know, like doing decent job. And we might find out it's like, oh shit, like I had no idea that this department was actually like doing this. And now that this department's not here, like three things have fallen apart in society. And it could happen. I'm not saying it will happen, but it could happen. It's like, oh shit, maybe we shouldn't have fired those guys. But I think that those are all things to consider.
Do you find it surprising to see such a large kind of buy-in from the conservative right in this country? Uh, a bunch of Republicans essentially cheering on an African and an Indian deciding how we spend our tax dollars.
Wait, what?
The joke was, do you find it surprising to see so many conservatives cheering on an African man and an Indian man deciding how your American tax dollars get spent?
Oh, I gotcha.
That's a throwaway when I fumbled over.
Yeah, no. I'm sorry. I think the delivery was good. I was just a little slow on that. I think that was a me problem and not a you problem. You know what? I think I think this shows you how far conservatism has come because it's like those people are Americans as far as I'm concerned. And I think that a lot of conservatives look at them and say that they are American. And that's my white pill of that. Like that's the silver lining in that, where it's like I'm sorry I didn't get the joke. I think it is really funny. That's
Look, I can't come all
me.
the way across the aisle, but I will say, as long as that brown man's wearing a tie and has a short haircut, I can probably listen to him talk.
That's fair. I don't think that's an outrageous position, but I think that it's refreshing that people see them as Americans. That they're not like, how, like, like I've never heard anybody. Out of all of the, like, when Vivek was in the race, I never heard anybody be like, well, he's in, you know what I mean? No, I'd never heard even like, how could we let that guy? There's no way. It's like everybody's just like, oh yeah, he's pretty smart. Or it's like, no, we don't like him because he like talks too fast and he thinks he says something, but he's really not saying it. You know what I mean? Like all of the criticism I never heard just like, boy, he's Indian, can't have that.
It is refreshing. I think that maybe that's what we should all be thankful for this Thanksgiving, is just how like good racial relations have gotten in this country, considering what they were 200 years ago and how nightmarish it was.
Considering what they were 50 years ago. Are you kidding? I mean, like,
that was one of my all-time favorite when I drove a little Lyft and Uber. One of my favorite ones was picking up two young UT students, and one of them was going on. It was probably during George Floyd stuff going on, maybe. But he was going on about how race relations have never been more tense in this country than right now. And I just kind of like paused, not knowing what to say. And thankfully, the other young college student was like, "Are you serious?" We used to have like pretty common lynchings in the South. Like that's pretty tense. We fought a civil war over it. Pretty tense.
I was about to say, it's like, yeah, we like Jim Crow. We used to like, remember those like the picture, like the videos of the hoses. I
don't even say anything when the black guy drinks out of my water fountain.
Oh, that is a wild statement. Like race relations have never been like more tense. It's like go Google a picture of like the hotel owner throwing the chemicals in the pool because there's black people in it. You know what I mean? It's like that's tense. Like those are tense race relations.
I think it was actually bleach. He was just trying to cure them.
Oh, well, I guess if I could get one of those baths, I would take it.
Don't ever. I was trying to think of the baseball player that did that. Are you familiar with the baseball player who's bleached his skin?
Mm-mm.
Oh, what is his name?
Uncle Ruckus. Does this baseball player also have revitiligo?
Oh, it's Sammy Sosa.
Oh, is he white now?
He is white now.
Oh, wait, what? Sammy Sosa's white?
Here we go.
When did this happen?
I got the picture for you right here. Let's see. Present. Share screen. And I lost it. Sammy Sosa.
Let's see. Oh.
The transformation is almost complete.
That's creepy.
It always ends up creepy. I guess I'm
Dude,
only thinking of
that's
Sammy Sosa and Michael Jackson, but
dude, I
is
mean,
there anybody who's racially transitioned that looks normal anymore?
that's oh my goodness. Dude, that hits like some uncanny valley stuff for me. Like he doesn't look like he looks just enough human he has human like features, but my brain's just like that's actually not a person. Like that like you'd be very scared of that thing right there. Like that's not a homo sapien as you like that's like part of my lizard brain screaming. It's like that's not a person. Be very afraid of that.
Let's stay away from that thing. You know what it oddly looks like a little bit to me is Adam Devine right here. He's got one of those faces already naturally, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, but he's like clearly white though. Like nothing about
Yes.
him. You know what I mean? Like he's Sammy Sosa.
Oh,
does look-
I'm sorry. I thought you were making this like that's not quite a human argument. I didn't realize the problem was that he was black. That was making you nervous. My apologies.
It's that is kind of the thing about that sticks with me.
No,
It's
the
like, that
weird looking white
man's-
guy's just a silly guy. The weird looking black guy, he makes me nervous for sure.
Yeah, it's kind of true though. Like I see the resemblance and I get what you're saying with it. I don't have the same visceral reaction to him as I did Sammy Sosa. That was weird. I don't like that. Yeah, that's not cool.
One of those pictures, somebody even tinted his eyes blue. It looked extra weird. Also,
Yeah,
didn't
that's
work.
like it's not natural. It's also like I mean, I'm not gonna say I don't get why somebody wouldn't want to be white. All right, I'm not, I'm not here to make that argument. I get it. All right,
You guys have been on a hell of a run. I see what you're doing.
I
get reaping the benefits of being on that team.
I get it, but also it's like I don't know. That's some extreme. Like I don't know. Maybe this is me just stereotyping and speaking in generalizations. Like Sammy Sosa, is your police brutality that bad? You know what I mean? Like, are you really like you're Sammy Sosa, bro? Everybody knows who you are to some degree in certain places and certain, like the older crowd. The older crowd knows who you are. The officer that's going to yank you out of your vehicle, he probably knows who Sammy Sosa is. He's probably rooting for you or against you while you and Mark McGuire are on steroids having the home run. You know what I mean? It's like,
how dare you besmirch the name of Sammy Sosa by bringing up steroids?
Look, they were cheating, like they were doping, and I'm not even going to say they're cheating, right? I think there should be two subsets of all sports. There's clean sports and there's steroid sports. I'd like to see how far we can push like the 100-yard dash. It's great that we can it's great that like clean men can run that fast. I'd like to see if we can break into 8 seconds on steroids. I'd like to see it.
I'm kind of with that. I mean, we have this gladiatorial arena that we call football games here in this country where we let guys break their bodies for sport. Like, sure, your heart explodes when you're 65, but let's see how fast we can get you, Mr. Miles.
Probably 45. You know what I mean? But it's like, and back to this complex trolley problem. We are more than okay with sacrifice, like all of those football players having CTE. You know what I mean? Like we're okay with all of that stuff. Like, why are we're supposed to care about athletes and their hearts because it's going to explode after they run the 400?
Well, to be fair, part of that conversation might be that like running the 400's interesting to see how fast people can get, but if we're going to sacrifice humans' bodies to something, we're going to do it for something awesome like football. This is the best sport, guys.
That's totally fair. It's totally fair.
It's my favorite one, at least.
I'd like to see. I mean, I was watching Liverpool play Man City or Real Madrid today. I'd like to see some soccer players on steroids. Let's see how fast they can run. See how hard they can kick that ball. I think it'd be very interesting to see how good they can be.
We may have already seen that on one level. I've ran across one time a Reddit feed about how Lionel Messi should not be allowed to play football professionally because he had some sort of complications upon birth, and they hopped him up on a shit ton of steroids to make sure he lived, and it continued a steroid regimen into his younger years as well. And so there's a segment of soccer fans out there that think he should be disqualified because of his upbringing on steroids.
Nah, he's small. You know what I mean? Like he's short. He's small. He would have died without it.
He would have died. He couldn't make it. He says she's just a little boy. He is a small man, and I definitely think that
sorry, 1 second.
you get after it.
Hmm?
Small interruption here.
No, that's it. Mm-hmm.
I would vouch for Lionel Messi. I think he's very strong for being a small stature. I do think that your argument definitely would be a stronger argument against a player if they looked like a Mario Balotelli in their prime. You know, if you're like a giant, or if you look like Holland out of Sweden right now, you're 6'6" and run like a horse. Then I can see why they'd be like, all right, this guy that was raised on steroids probably shouldn't be playing.
Yeah,
but Messi was never like the absolute fastest guy on the field. He was very fast, but
he's
I don't think
good.
he was ever known for being a burner. He was known for his skill.
He's just super good, you know. And it's like, oh, it's like he cheated. He had to have steroids to try to live. And it's, okay, like don't. And I'm sure the portion of those people saying that also would say that if their high school coach didn't have it out for them, they could have made it. You know what I mean? It's the same type of people. It's like,
so if you're willing to dismiss this type of childhood that gave him an obvious athletic advantage over his competition, why then are you such an opponent to the trans athletes who just happen to have grown up in a situation that allowed them to be slightly more athletic? It's not their fault.
Fair enough. I mean, on the surface, you have a good argument, but I think if we were actually to try to like break into this, you have a horrible argument. I think it's there. That's a very, you know what? You hit me with like a left wing false equivalency argument right there, sir. It's like, oh, you're opposed to steroids saving a child's life. Well, why shouldn't this grown man be able to beat up women in volleyball?
Well, if the problem is going under the hood and therefore looking at the penis, what if we found out Lionel Messi had 2 sets of genitalia? Would that disqualify him as an unfair advantage?
I don't think so, because he's not playing as a woman. Like, you know what I mean? Like if he was out there masquerading as a chick, I'd be like, I don't know, like he's got a penis under there, he shouldn't be able to play. But if he's got a penis and a vagina, like who cares? He's still playing with the dudes.
Oh, I was talking about 2 penises and 2 testicles.
So 4 testicles?
If he's doubled up on dicks, is he then disqualified from the regular men's category?
Well, do we have like a para soccer league? Like,
I don't know if that's para though. It seems like super enabled.
Right, it's like what an insult to put like all of these people that have like crippling disabilities to put, and it's just like this guy's got 2 dicks. He's like he plays with you guys.
Perhaps there's a conversation to be said too of like the size of said penises, penis size. I don't know how to pluralize penis, panasias, because I'm sure that if you go back to Holland up there. Or Lukaku out of the Ivory Coast, like you might find enough penis mass to counteract having 2 penises.
Right, it's like yes, he does have 2 penises, but all right,
Lukaku's dragging 8 pounds of penis around the field scoring goals. So I don't know why we're worried about this guy.
That is totally fair. You're not wrong, man. You're not wrong at all. I think that's a very interesting conversation. See, and this is probably what our government should be spending money on doing, right? Like, this is back to like that. Like these are the important questions.
I mean, we spent it on gender equality in Pakistan. We spent it on transgender habits within monkeys. We've spent it on overseas drag shows for NSOs. What's ridiculous about spending it on the question that truly matters
for soccer players?
Is it fair for the guys with the biggest penises to play with guys with perfectly average and satisfactory penises like ourselves that every woman's perfectly fine with and has never had a problem with?
These are the real questions. And you know what? It probably takes somebody as ambitious like Vivek and Elon to get to the bottom of the real questions that are actually plaguing Americans' minds, because it's not the economy, it's not inflation, it's not an open border that's keeping Americans up at night. It's this.
And if anybody cares about the inequality of penis size, I got to imagine 2 slightly autistic tech billionaires are probably quite concerned with that. Not throw too much shade at them, but something tells me those guys aren't just packing the.
Dude, how upset would you be if they are?
It is upsetting to find that out. Like there's a a specific one I could think of a guy I didn't like in high school that we all thought was an ass, and we all, oh, this piece of shit, and motherfucking him. And then we were doing it to a guy who didn't like him or support him, but had went to high school and played sports with him, and was like, actually, it's pretty impressive. And you're like, God damn it, he does have a huge dick. That sucks.
Oh, I know. Exactly.
Also has that over my head.
Right. Oh, that piece of shit. No one likes him. I'm not going to name him because he probably turned out to be a nice guy.
That'd be rude. Yeah, I don't want to do that to him. I don't know that I had too many problems with him other than he was dating the girls I thought was pretty, and it turns out because his penis was hitting him in the knees the whole time.
Yeah, I couldn't compete. I had like the primal like teenage jealousy of being inferior. That's why I didn't like this guy.
It definitely played a role in that distaste. All right, this was a hell of a tangent we went on.
Yeah. Anyway,
I did want to bring up this, that like, what is your level of concern? For example, if you were to tell me I was going to create Doge tomorrow, and I needed to pick the most appropriate person to decide where the inefficiencies of government were within, I would think Rand Paul would probably be at the top of that list for me. I don't think that my first inclination would be to go look for 2 tech billionaires to decide how to do it. I know Vivek's not technically a billionaire yet.
I mean, he's worth what, $600 million?
A lot of money.
Yeah, it's at a certain point, it's like, nah, potatoes. I think if you can't live the lifestyle that you want to live at being worth $600 million, like, you've got problems. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I can't live a billionaire life.
If you're not happy with 600 million, then money was not the thing keeping you from
for sure. It's like you have a way deeper hole that you need therapy for. You know what I mean? And just like drugs and money cannot fill that hole. Like you need some Jesus, you need some therapy, like you need something deeper, bro. So I think that you would want a tag team. I think that you want somebody I think a Rand Paul. Ron Paul is the perfect person. I think that it's also like we should let Ron Paul be. I think, like I think Ron Paul's done his service. I think he's done his job.
You mean Rand Paul?
No, like I'm talking about Ron Paul.
Ron
right?
Paul as well.
Yeah. No, I'm saying that like Ron Paul should not be a part of this.
Gotcha.
Yeah, like he's done his service. Like he should be entitled to live the rest of his days in peace. Like he's done his job. He's done his part for like advancing liberty in this country. So like we should leave Ron Paul alone. Like let him just be retired and hang out and do whatever he wants because like he's done his part. Rand Paul, like a Thomas Massey, like you'd want a duo of somebody that is in government that can walk you through the intricacies of the budgetary process, right? So like if Rand Paul is closely working with somebody like Vivek, I think it's a good thing because Vivek's probably going to come in there and say, these are a bunch of like, why do these departments exist? This is all fluff. And Rand Paul might agree, like, yes, this is all fluff. Let's get rid of it. Or he might be like, actually, this is why this budget process, like, this is why this department exists. So I want the two of it.
Just hearing you say Rand Paul might say, no, this is a justified, is like, this is why we should have gone with Ron. Get his dad in there. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
He's too soft. He's been bought, and I don't.
Fair enough. I just say, and it's not to say like I hear you. I agree. I just think that Ron Paul's like earned his right to like live his days in peace. That's all I'm trying to say.
We had our chance for Ron to,
and we screwed him,
and we screwed it up.
And we screwed him. So he should get to like spend the rest of his days in peace and not have to worry about the triflings of the American government. I think that it's a tough one because there's a shrewdness, like government is not business and business is not government. And just because somebody is good at one thing does not mean that there's like a direct crossover, right? And so there's some, like I can use like an exact, like, and I'll leave like names out of it, right? But there's somebody that ended up like working in a role here, and they've come from the military, and they were exceptionally good at what they did in the military, and they've worked in other roles, and they're really good at their job in the village. But the thing is like they weren't in the military anymore, and so like you can't treat a civilian job the same way that you treat a military job. And like they were good at their job. It was just like unfortunately, people have soft skin, and that's a whole another story. But I say that it's like the trade, like it's not all one to one, and so
Flip
just be
that burger, son.
and like just because you're a really like just because you know how to run a multi-million dollar, multi-billion dollar company, I don't know. It's like there's just like a little bit more intricacy in it that I hope that they have some good guidance from the inside, from somebody like Rand Paul or
Yeah. And maybe that's
like a
what these
Thomas
special
Massey.
council setups kind of
Yeah,
also
and
have a benefit
I
of.
like it. What do you think?
So the part that scares me a little bit more maybe is specifically having two very wealthy guys from the same industry. So, and I think that's been the very fair criticism vaulted from the left on this idea of Doge is like, hey, you're taking the richest guy on the planet and you're putting him in charge of deregulation. A guy that's got businesses in probably every field you could possibly
I mean,
imagine and money all over the
SpaceX
place.
and defense, the two biggest ones, right? This is a guy that has direct interest in this, like not even indirect interest, direct interest.
Right. Yeah, and I mean that's just the obvious ones. Like this guy has plenty of money and plenty of industries and plenty of investments. So there's a lot of different ways, and you don't know where all those investments are with the guy with as much money as Elon Musk either. So
Yeah.
who knows what the secret target could be? You could even leave those alone. But I mean, yeah, that's a great. I'm sure he's going to find a lot of inefficiencies within NASA.
Oh,
Why wouldn't he?
absolutely. And why the procurement process of NASA? And it's not to say, and this is where I think it's going to be very tricky, and we should keep a very suspicious and healthy skepticism about it. Is that Elon's probably going to find some waste in NASA, and he's probably going to find some better ways to do it. That's great. But who's going to be the direct recipient and beneficiary of those new like the deregulations of the waste cutting? It's going to be him. And so it's like, yeah, we did cut down on some waste, but we also just gave you way more power over. And so, like, this only furthers my. I believe that he is a supervillain,
It's
and
Lex Luthor.
he is going to like Elon Musk. I think is actually going to be like the downfall of human civilization. I think that he is going to like single handedly wreck us, and like he is a supervillain. He is Lex Luthor incarnate.
I mean,
He
hey,
is
this is my theory. This is why he made sure that Bezos was on the scene first, and then he forced Bezos to take on the phenotype of Lex Luthor to throw the scent off the trail. This is the smoke screen, and now he's
yeah,
in our government.
he is, and it's like he is very involved. I mean, now granted, there's a lot of copium going on in this, and there's a lot of like shade throwing. But I read this really interesting article, and like I could tell where like the bias was coming from, but it actually makes a very interesting point. It's like who's actually the vice president? Is it JD Vance or is it Elon Musk? And it's like who's going to actually have more influence and power on the decisions that the president makes? And it's like, that's interesting because here we are, right? And so this is the hypocrisy of it, and I think that we would not be doing our job if we didn't point it out. Here are now two unelected officials
Mm-hmm.
having massive amounts of say over how the government runs. Like it's kind of blaring, and it's like and we're like, oh yeah, go. We want you to reduce the waste, but it's like, oh cool. I'm glad that we gave this exorbitant amount of power to unelected bureaucrats.
Yeah, and is that not what we're always ranting on in this show? Is the dichotomy of, hey, I'm going to do this thing for the good of the people, and then that being misappropriated into all of the atrocities of government. And this
Yeah,
is the exact same story. So it is
it
very
is.
important that we stay on top of it and it's critical of it while it's happening. Because hey, yeah, and specifically anybody who's a right winger who is cheering this on, like this is the moment of truth here. This
Yes,
could get
and
really ugly or it could get really good, and
yeah,
it's going to come down to and encouragingly, they seem to be wanting at least preaching a big game about transparency and about
as they
posting
all do.
everything online, as they to be fair, as they all do. But hopefully, I've seen some more maybe tangible is not the right word. I've seen some plans in place to like actually enact said supposed transparency. So I'm encouraged by that. But it is becoming onto us, especially the ones that are on his side, because those are he can push a lot of this through if the entirety of the right supports it. So
Right.
it is incumbent upon the right now to look at this and go like, hey man, why is NASA the only and first program getting cut and you're not worried about all these other ones, or whatever amalgamation that Elon Musk comes up with to benefit himself privately. And I guess that's fair to say too, that even if he does a tremendous job and cuts a ton of inefficiencies out of our government, it's still probably going to find a way to benefit Elon Musk. That's just kind of how this works when somebody this important and this intelligent gets a hold of a position with this much power.
No doubt. I'd like to take a quick little break. I don't want to go too much longer since we're like hour 35, but I have some thoughts on that. Let's expand. Let's be the naysayers about Doge when we come back. Let's continue that.
I like it.
Let's see. What are we brand? I'm going to try. What was the last one? It was night driving. Let's try daydreaming.
I thought you said day drinking for a second. It's
Oh,
a very different song.
I'm down with that too. All right, we'll be right back. This break is brought to you by the Military Industrial Complex. Do you hate brown children across seas? Do you wake up and wonder, while your life is not going perfect, while some poor brown kid is able to just breathe today? Well, look no further. Make sure that you pay your taxes to make sure that the Military Industrial Complex can build more weapons, build more bombs, and make sure that those poor brown kids do not get to wake up tomorrow. That's right. Make sure that you pay your taxes. That's right. That's right. This message brought to you by
Pay your taxes today and hold off the uprising of a new empire tomorrow. Destabilizing the world.
One bomb at a time. One day at a time. Brought to you, paid for by the MIC.
Ooh, the MIC has a nice ring to it. It sounds playful.
Oh, that's as beat you back, and I was like, how do I feel this dead air time? I have nothing meaningful to say yet. I remember this happened this year. Like the same day that it was like April 22nd, I want to say, because I think tax day fell. Or was it April 15th is when whatever day taxes are due. I think it's April 15th. It was like the 17th or whatever. The way that like the week fell. I was talking to one of my good buddies, and he told me how much he had to pay in like the check he had to write in taxes this year. And he's like, after we've already paid all this, I had to write those motherfuckers this large of a check, and they just like go ahead and send another aid package to Israel. And it's just like the least they can do. What did he say? He's like, the least they can do is send me a picture of some dead kid, and is like, know that like this is what my bomb paid for. He's like, at least I can pin it on my fridge and like at least know what my taxes did.
Man, that makes an interesting conversation, and like that the idea that like you have a tax sheet and you get to select preferred taxes. Like, hey, you have to pay your taxes, but you get to select what they go towards. I'm sure there's a name for this type of system, but it's escaping me at the moment. But if you just send like, hey, here's the military spending on average, and this is how many civilian deaths it resulted in last year. Like, do you think we spend enough money on military, or do you think we should up this number?
Yeah, the problem with that is you would never get to know that number because the government would never admit how many civilians it kills. You know what I
It
mean?
was zero again, guys. We're the best military ever.
We do so good. We're so good at targeting
The good thing, the good guys are the strongest.
We do so good at only targeting insurgents. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, I know that there was like at least 17 women and children in that house, but I mean, they live with terrorists. Am I right?
This terrorist was 4 years old and had an IED that looked like a kickball. Good thing we got him off the streets.
Yeah. Yeah. This message brought to you by the MIC. Pay your taxes. All right. So to be critics of Doge, which I think is very important for us to take. I know we've talked about like why we like it. We've talked about the legal aspects and some of those ins and outs. To your point, we have appointed two very wealthy people that have serious interest in their respective industries. I know Elon Musk is like space and telecoms, and Vivek, I mean, I don't think he's CEO of Roivant anymore, but he has a large stake in a experimental pharmaceutical company. And it's going to be, so this is, I guess I'll frame it like this. It's the trolley problem. Are we okay with government waste getting cut at the expense of these guys making a fortune at it? Are we and because it's not, you don't get one or the other, because in a perfect world, they're 100% altruistic and they only want to see, and I'm not even saying that they're bad people, but incentives matter. And if you could make recommendations that gut the regulatory agencies so that you could get more drugs out onto the market, would you not want to? If you could gut a regulatory agency that prevents you from becoming the world's largest space space equipment provider, wouldn't you want to?
And how easy is it to make the argument that these are already inefficient industries within our government? It's not that I'm picking on just the thing I make money on necessarily. I am picking on a terribly corrupted, broken system that I'm getting out of here in order for what I have been preaching the entire time is more efficient and beneficial to the people, which is a free market solution. It just so happens that I'm also very well positioned for this free market solution. But can't imagine Vivek and Musk don't have a little bit of an ego. These are guys who have been tremendously successful. They've made a lot of money and they've been very influential in political spaces. Like any metric you can kind of put on them, these are very successful guys.
Absolutely.
So who's to tell them they're not going to be tremendously more efficient and beneficial to mankind? I'm sure that within their own minds, it's not an evil takeover. It truly is. I mean, hey, back to the Lex Luthor uh, component to this. Like Lex Luthor was never the bad guy in Lex Luthor's mind. Lex Luthor was trying to save people from the potential tyrant that was Superman. This great power. It's the exact same analogy. Not I'm trying to save you from the greatest, most tyrannical power there is, which is federal government. It just so happens that I'm going to get insanely rich along the way when I'm helping benefit you. And why shouldn't I? I've done this tremendous service for the American people.
Yeah. Hence the trolley problem, which we need to, and I wish that society was more mature to start having. And so I can use like a very real world example. Also, no names mentioned. It doesn't matter. No one knows these people, except those that do, and they already know who I'm talking about, so it doesn't matter. So we had somebody in this last election for mayor. The person that became mayor in this town is also a prominent business person. And I was asked by one of like a really good friend of mine in before the election. And he's like, "What? Like, how do you feel about this? And what do you think the checks and balances might be?" And I said, "I don't know." You know what I mean? It's like there is a really good chance that there could be some, that there might be some benefits of this person now being mayor. And then I said, but if the roads get better, if the water infrastructure gets better, if the things that you care about get better, how much do you care? And then it's like, what's the metric? Like, how much money? And I'm not saying, like, I'm not, like, to be clear, in case any local people are listening, I'm not making any accusations that this person is abusing their power, because you know what I mean? Like, this
Because I
person
don't
is
want a lawsuit on my desk.
no. Like this person's a friend of mine. Like, this is a person I support. I've openly supported this person. He's a friend of mine. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not here to throw accusations out there, but I guess I'm just trying to prove the point. It's like, okay, so even if they do, right? And I'm not saying that they did, but even if they did use their position of power to benefit themselves, but all of these other problems that you care about get better, does it matter? And then what's the cost benefit, right? Like, how much money would it, like, is it like if their business did 5% more, do you care? Because that's not that much. Is it 10? Like, what's the threshold of, like, now they've unduly benefited from the position of power that they hold? Now, this is outrageous because it's not a 0 and it's not 100. So what's the threshold of, like, now this is unacceptable? Because you know what I mean? Like, if you get everything that you want out of this department, and Elon and Vivek make 5% more money, is that really that? Are we upset with that? And that's the question. It's like, what's the threshold? Is it 20? Is it 25% more increase of their wealth? Where do we draw the line? It's like, now this is not okay.
And specifically in the example of Doge here with Elon and Ramaswamy, if they close the loophole behind them and they get exorbitantly rich, is that also a benefit? I mean, I would think that probably is more positive. If they make it obviously not possible to do this, but if they made it impossible for somebody else to benefit financially from the use of government in the future, but along the way became perpetually the two richest men to exist afterwards, is that an acceptable trade-off?
Are we okay with it? And these are the type of trolley problem. That's what I mean. Like, the world and politics are a complex trolley problem, which, like, it's A or B, right? Are we okay with them getting insane? Like, let's take this to, it's more like the darker side of this. Elon and Vivek go in there with ulterior motives, and they gut regulatory agencies, and they make an exorbitant amount of money. I mean, they increase their wealth by 50-60%. So now Elon, like, is worth several, like, hundreds of billions. Now Vivek is a billionaire. But along the way, you solve some serious government overspending in the next 100 years. Like, now the financial stability of America for the next 100 years is set in a good trajectory. Are we okay with that? Are we okay with two guys ripping and playing the system in the worst way? And in the end of the day, it's actually better for all of us.
If you do get the benefit.
Are we okay with it?
Yeah, it's
Even
interesting.
knowing
And
that Yeah, go ahead.
Even being the Department of Government Efficiency and them slashing prices, and it's still at its core is kind of the exact same thing that this department was created to destroy. It is, if they use this department to then further their own gain, you still have an example of government now using regulation or the removal of regulation, perhaps, to benefit a specific party that's within the deciding. The cabal that decides this is ultimately going to benefit from it. Yeah, it's really interesting conversation. I don't know if I've thought in depth enough to like have a feel on that, or it's certainly not in depth enough to have like quantitative percentages of like, well, as long as they only get 7.5% further. I think it's also, especially in the case of Elon Musk, is he currently the richest man in the world? Who is the richest person in the world? I like that Google autofilled person, like it's not obviously a man. Yeah, Elon Musk is number one. Numeral uno. So with somebody,
anyway. 70 billion on Twitter. You know what I mean?
So when you have somebody who's got that kind of money, I think there's a more subtle thing you have to watch for too, because the game is not really about money. Money's part of it. It's a measure of it. But the success of somebody with the wealth and power and influence of Elon Musk, I don't think is measured in zeros in your bank account. It's more about this legacy at this point, and what can I influence and how can I control swaths of society. And again, a lot of that is done through money. So it's not that money is not a part of this.
You gotta have money to do it.
Like, I don't think that Elon Musk driving force at this point is making more money. I think it's more influencing the population of the entire world,
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think there's that to be said too, that it could very easily not be SpaceX that he's trying to vault up and trying to boost. It could much more likely be like, what is his next endeavor on changing the global culture, or at least the U.S. culture, and what does he have planned for that? Because it could be a lot more important to him than making more money at SpaceX.
Yeah, well, I mean, at a certain point, like, how much is enough? And I think that everybody, I won't like linger too much on this part of it, but I think every person has to ask is like, what is enough? You know what I mean? Like, how much success do you need to be successful, right? Like, how many, like, what's the number in your bank account that, I mean, like, you've made it. And this, yeah, and I think everyone's got to ask that question. At a certain point, like, I can't imagine, as somebody that, like, trying to get a business off the ground, trying to make it, I would like some more zeros in my bank account. However, there's going to come a point to where it's like, if you could add another zero, like, I've got enough, I've got enough in the bank account. It doesn't matter. And so I could only imagine that somebody who is like worth $100 billion or whatever he's worth, like, what joy, like, what could you buy with being worth $200 billion that you can't buy worth being $100 billion or $150 billion, right? So, like, to your point, the endeavor becomes a lot more social.
The tools become priceless. The toys you want become priceless at some point.
Yeah, and I think that to that point, it's now you want power. Now you want influence. The things that can actually like move and shake the course of human history.
How do I influence things that I can't influence with money anymore?
Mm-hmm.
What are the things that are out of the grasp of my wealth to be influential?
Right, I can't buy this, so how can I influence it? And that is, so there's a report, and I can't remember who put it out. I don't know, some school of political science from some really good university. I don't think that all universities are captured institutions, and therefore we should write them everything that comes out of all these universities off. And they concluded that America is not a democracy; it is an oligarchy. And this was, I don't know, 5-6 years ago. And
we probably had an episode about that somewhere in our back.
I bet we have, actually. And so if we acknowledge, right, and it's like, I don't think that we should fool ourselves that this is not a republic, this is not a democracy, this is an oligarchy. I think that this episode has like brought me back down to earth. Like, we need to have probably more skepticism of Doge than stoke at this point, because it's something that we want, right? Like, as freedom loving libertarian people, like, yes, let's reduce government waste, but also let's put the world's richest man in charge of it. It's like that. Ooh, this has been turning me, because it's like, if you want to talk about an oligarchy, put the richest man in the world in charge of regulations. And it's such a double-edged sword, because not all regulations are good regulations, right? Some of them are simply for the sake of regulating, and a lot of them
Some of
have
them were
to.
placed by other rich, influential people years and years ago in order to benefit their corporate interests.
Absolutely. And it's like, so Matt Mitchell, we've had him on the podcast. He's a friend. Like, last time I saw him, we were talking about he just won an award about his research in, like, healthcare regulations, specifically have like ambulance services, where, oh, we're going to leave the hospitals in charge of making sure that any of their competition that wants to roll in can't. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, like, we're not going to let another ambulance service in this town. And everyone goes, oh, well, it's probably has to do with healthcare. It's like, no, it's just because the hospital doesn't want competition. And so there's lots of those type of regulations. But then there's the other type of regulations that make sure that your milk is not tainted with salmonella, that you don't get bad meat. You know what I mean? There's a flip side of regulations too. That, and we have to do this episode. It's got to be the balance, right? It's like, is all commercial plane regulation good? Probably not. A lot of it stops planes from falling out of the air, though. So where's the balance there?
Yeah, there were some internal regulations that Boeing started ignoring. If you guys remember any of those stories, they had a couple issues along the way.
Right.
Yeah, that's always an important part to keep in this, even as the anarcho-libertarian types that we might be, is like there is a rank choice priority in what regulations we should probably want to get rid of first. And there are certain regulations where it's like, hey, when it has to do with safety and health and like, those aren't the worst things in the world. Those are,
Sure.
we can continue to have our libertarian ideological debates about that well into the future, while we cut some of the more grotesque things in the short term.
Absolutely. And there is every single one of these conversations has to be nuanced. Like, let's take health stuff, right? Like, is the FDA the end all be all of what is safe? Of course not. I mean, they, like, the fact that high fructose corn syrup can be sold in jars called syrup. You know what I mean? Like, that is not healthy. That is not good. So we should probably address that. However, I like the fact that, whether you agree or disagree with the benefits or detriments of Tylenol, I like that I can take if like I need to pop an ibuprofen, that I'm not going to die from it. You know what I mean? Because once upon a time, there was, was it Chicago, the Tylenol deaths, where I can't remember how many people died from a tainted batch of Tylenol that wasn't properly, it's like, so so you can't just so it's got to be a multifaceted, like, the agency itself should not be revered, and we have to scrutinize everything, but we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater, because, like, yes, I do not like, I get that the same FDA that approves all of these drugs that have a lot of side effects, yada, blah, blah, blah. I get all of that stuff. I'm not talking about the pharmaceutical industrial complex. I get that they greenlight that, but they also ensure that any over-the-counter thing that I buy in a store has been tested to be safe, so that every time I go to the store, I don't have to worry about, like, is this chicken actually safe or not? Yeah, it's like, how's it, like, ooh, did some, yeah, it's I don't
I
know.
think you open it up to the free market, you let those stores come up with their own testing and standards, and we know which CVSs kill you when you get Tylenol from there pretty
That's
soon.
fair.
So we can make an informed decision after a generation of medical emergencies and
And if
deaths.
we're okay with that, then, like, I don't know what's right or wrong. I don't know if it's good or bad. If we're okay as a society using people as guinea pigs to figure out which testing facilities are reputable, okay, I'll play. I will play the game as is dictated to me. I read this article the other day about like 7 tourists that died in Laos or Cambodia, Thailand, one of those stuff, because of bad alcohol. And this is, it's like if I go to a bar and I get like, spare me all of the drinking's poison. I know it. I get it. If I go to a bar, if I want to drink, if I want to ruin my life, it's my right. Aren't you libertarians? Like let me ruin my life. If I go to a bar, I don't want to worry about is the whiskey tainted or not. Like, am I gonna die from this shot? I like being able to just like be able to ruin my life in peace, you know?
Right. That's a fair point. I guess there's a, if I was going to steel man the libertarian free market side of it, that would kind of be the idea, is that like, will you ultimately, yes, the trolley problem is going to result in some alcohol deaths along the way. But ultimately, once we have pursed out all these bad industries, you will get a more honest corporate system that is no longer backed and bailed out by government whenever it overspends itself, because that will be no longer there.
Fair.
And you have now created an onus system where all of these people are now self-regulating and probably doing, in a lot of cases, a better job of regulating, because it is their reputation on board and not simply some dipshit bureaucrat from the government checking on it.
Fair enough. Because Boeing did such a good job at self-regulating.
That's what I'm saying, though. What happened to Boeing before that? We bailed them out, and they thought they'd get away with this shit. You gotta get off the treadmill at some point.
Okay, no, you're totally right, and I think that there is something to that. I also wonder, and this might be like, we can either talk about it now or we can table it. I wonder if like we are too far into the consolidation of wealth to try a free market experiment, because the distribution of wealth and the collection of wealth, I mean, like leaving the market up to BlackRock, Vanguard, and all of the other 1%ers, is that actually a free market? Or do we just get our corporate hellhole overlords? You know what I mean? Like at this point, are we too far down the rabbit hole of capital concentration for that to work? I don't know. That's something that
is interesting, because obviously the consolidation of power and money, like you said, is pretty concerning right now, as it is. And I guess I'd love to give a one-line answer on this, and then I'm good to call it, because I don't want to start this conversation and put another hour on this podcast. But I think even in and of that, you still kind of come back to the same argument of like, these guys got to this point not because of free market capitalism. They got to this point because of government interference into this free market, into government assurances, into government handouts, into corporate welfare. And that is what ultimately made them the powers they are to be today, and not a free market that allowed them to monopolize. And that downstream of economics is culture. And your economic system does change and influence the culture that it lords over. And that the only way to eventually get off this treadmill is to have an engaged, active, much like my big white pill libertarian possible future is, that it takes a sophisticated voting base and a sophisticated civilian base to look at these problems, to look at things like Amazon and say, no, we as a purchasing power have decided you are disqualified because of your amoral corporate behavior. And maybe that's a pipe dream on my side, but that's the pitch for the white pill of the libertarian future without any regulations that works out.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I think that there is a way. I think there's a way forward with that. I just wonder about like the concentration of wealth, and I'm not trying to put on a communist hat, because I despise communists, and so like don't like, they're not people as far as I'm concerned. And I just wonder, it's like, that sounds great, but the poor person's going to buy Tyson chicken because it's cheap, even though, you know. And so and I don't know how to solve that problem, and maybe that problem can't be solved without, like, I don't know if you can like logically and morally consistently solve that problem. Yeah, this is a whole different episode. I think, yeah, or it's a whole nother hour. It's too, for sure.
Yeah,
Um,
let's wrap it there before we go on another tangent. We got our Doge in.
all right, fair enough. Well, let's end on this, Logan. What's something you're thankful for this year?
Ooh, something I'm thankful for this year. I'm really thankful that Congress got together and made sure we launched some intercontinental missiles before this horrible presidency comes in and ends all the wonderful wars. No, I'm being facetious there. uh, Despite all of the concerns we have with this new Doge system and the apprehension I have with the two rich guys that are in charge of it and the potential supervillains they may be, I am thankful for just the opportunity for the average dumb NPC voter to get an opportunity to see the inner workings of the inefficiencies of government spending, and perhaps a step towards my libertarian worldview of all of us waking up to taxation being theft and eventually reaching the utopia I have in my head
Okay,
20 or so generations after we're dead.
that's what's up. I like it. What's something you're thankful about personally?
I got to on the fly come up with something. You got to throw something else at me. Let's see. You know what? I'm very thankful to be an uncle this year. I have a great little nephew. He's the cutest little son of a gun. He's been working on saying my name, so I might get to hear it over the holiday season come right out of his mouth, and I'm pumped for my young nephew. I can't wait to instill esoteric knowledge upon him through my hopefully by the time he's forming memories, wizard length beard. I'm going to try to model my entire unclehood after Gandalf the Grey. I want to just kind of breeze in and out of this kid's life randomly, leave him with some salient random advice, and take him on tremendous life altering adventures along the way.
So what's up? That's dope.
Do
That's
I have to
super.
ask you, or do you have something you want to say that you're thankful for?
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I'm just I think it coincides. It's both like a political thing that also becomes personal. It's like I'm super thankful to live in this country. I
Mm.
am super stoked to live in a place that allows you to try to do it, try to make it. I've been trying to get a business off the ground. I'm trying, it's like I'm hustling. And I like the opportunity that's afforded to me that, you make the right connections, you work hard, you have the opportunity. I'm not saying you're going to make it because I don't know if I'm going to make it, but the opportunity
You
is
got a shot.
dope
You're not in a caste system.
for sure.
At least
And
you're
I
not
think,
destined to be a peasant for. Well, we might be
yeah,
destined to be peasants forever, but at
well,
least there's the opportunity, or at least the illusion of escape in front
I
of
might
us.
be a peasant with, nicer stuff one day. You know
There we
what I
go.
mean?
There we go.
And yeah, but I'm super thankful for that. I'm very thankful for, I don't know, just a lot of like I've got good people in my life. I'm super stoked. I'm super thankful that there's like my goodness and blessings abound in my life, and I can get frustrated and I can get myopic about how things aren't going my way or this struggle or that. But anytime I take a step back, it's like life is ultimately good. I'm surrounded by people that love me, that I love. I've got opportunity, and I'm just thankful for that. I think that's super dope because I know that a lot of people don't get that. And yeah, that's what I'm thankful for this year.
I like it. I like it.
Yeah.
You may have
All
even
right.
been plucked out of a situation that wasn't that, adopted into your nice Church of Christ family.
For sure. It's yeah, I mean, I'm super thankful about that. I often wonder about alternative lifestyle, like what could my life have been? And I rest on that I am the recipient of goodness and blessings that I do not deserve. Don't know what to call it, like where it comes from. And you know what I mean? Something that dope. And I don't think it's that interested in what we call it. But I know that's good.
It's all karma, man. The Hindus talk about this. We have dope lives now because we were dope in our last lives.
Probably so. That's fair. I mean, we don't. I mean, this
It's an
dopeness. It's just
unbroken life of continual rebirths of being totally dope.
that's what's up. And yes, we are. Yeah, I agree with that. All right, well, that's all I got, man. Thank you guys for joining us. I will release this episode for Thanksgiving tomorrow. So if you are having a bad Thanksgiving and you need to escape from what I hope you don't. I hope that everyone has a lovely Thanksgiving. But if you need a little reprieve from whatever
You're tired
tomorrow
of your
might
uncle
bring you,
screaming at the table. Come listen to us scream into the internet for a little while.
absolutely. So we love you guys. Thank you so much. We wouldn't, actually, I would say that we wouldn't do this without you guys. Logan and I will do this with or without you. But we are thankful that you join us, that you choose to spend your time with us. It means the world to us. But also, Logan and I are so full of ourselves. Like, we will, even if there were no listens every single week, we'd still do this and be pretty much the same level of happiness. to be fair, but
yeah, we're pretty happy to dictate the ways to run the world to you, whether we had a podcast or not. It was a common occurrence anyway.
It's never stopped us before, an audience or not. But thank you very much for joining us. I hope everybody has a wonderful Thanksgiving. We love you all. And with all that being said, and this is also very important as you go into Thanksgiving, it might be contentious. You might have the uncle that's trying to spell Trump with his P's across to try to agitate other people. Remember, there's more important things in politics, and that's how we fight against the mob, with people over politics. So have a good Thanksgiving. Tell the people you love that you actually do love them, and we'll see you guys next week.